Welcome to Super Mania. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and I am so very excited for today's episode. Just a little forewarning, it might be a little bit of a tearjerker. Today, we're talking about diagnosis. So, if you're not familiar with the show, we talk about neurodiversity and mental health on this show. Neurodiversity simply means that your brain processes information in a different way. So, that can be anything from bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, all the way to ADHD, dyslexia, autism, dyspraxia. There's all different types of neurodiversity, and we make up almost a third of the population. And we are here to celebrate neurodiversity and mental health variances. And I'm very, very happy for my two guests to be with me today. One of these faces you very well may recognize from my other show, Career Launch Live. She's definitely been with me a few times. I'm going to go ahead and bring in our mental health warrior, Rubaica Fidvi.
Hi,
Welcome.
Catherine. Lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure.
I cannot wait. So, tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do and all of your awesomeness.
Thank you so much, Catherine. You're so gracious and so generous. So, my name is Rubaica Fidvi, and I am a physician and a psychotherapist by training, but I consider myself a lifelong and passionate mental health advocate by heart. And I also see myself as a mental health warrior. So I have experienced many an internal and external battle on my personal mental health journey. And I believe that this has only strengthened me and it has empowered me to be a better human being and to be a bit better practitioner.
I love that. I absolutely. That was a great intro, by the way. You must do this a lot. So let me also welcome on our second guest. I'm also very excited to have him. He is a new guest for me, and I am a huge fan of all of his work. Let's welcome on Mark Travis Rivera. Welcome.
Hi, y'all. How you doing? Good morning, good day, wherever time zone you're in. Hi. First of all, thank you,
Hi.
Catherine, for welcoming to your space, to your show. Really happy to meet all of you here today. My name is Mark Rivera. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I identify as a queer, Latinx, disabled femme person, and I'm a professional storyteller. I tell stories through the various mediums, and so that's what I do. And I talk a lot about mental health, and I talk about love and disability and intersectionality. So that's why I'm here today.
I love that, and I want to also highlight one of uh, one of your most interesting projects. So you have a unique dance program that you're
Yeah.
involved with. Can you tell us just a little bit about that real
Yeah,
quick?
so I founded Marked Dance Project from 2009 to 2019. So I actually dissolved it. So I just do independent choreography now. But I created a dance company, becoming the youngest person in the United States at 17, to start an integrated dance company for disabled and non-disabled dancers. So I've been doing
I
it
love
professionally for over 12 years. And yeah, it was an amazing chapter in my life. And I still continue to do that work just as an
I
independent
love that.
choreographer.
I just think that's amazing.
Thank
I just
you.
absolutely am enamored by that project. I just think
Thanks.
that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So I did want to highlight that, and we'll talk more about you guys at the end as well. So today our topic is diagnosis. And this is something that the three of us know quite a bit about. So just to go ahead and put it out there is, and Mark, you knocked it out of the park right off the bat, telling, kind of give you more details about yourself. So thank you. I have two different neurodiversities. So one is that I have bipolar 1, and the other is that I have a rare seizure disorder that is similar, kind of similar concept to epilepsy. And so my brain processes information differently. It also causes some different physical characteristics. In fact, sometimes on the show, you may notice that it looks like I'm winking at you, like I'm trying to pick you up. I promise I'm not. That is just part of my condition. It's sometimes I have facial tics and things like that. So I've definitely been through the diagnosis process, also on the medical side, but that's a whole other show. Can you tell us, Rubaica, about any neurodiversity you have? or
Yes.
experience with diagnosis process.
Yes, yes. I think I'm in an interesting position because I've been in both areas. So as a as a doctor and as a mental health practitioner, I've been in the arena of diagnosing clients and patients, but I've also been on the other side. So I have experienced anxiety and depression for most of my life. And earlier on, it was okay, but through my 20s and 30s, just because of extenuating life circumstances, there were I was very symptomatic, and we're going to probably talk about this in the show as well. Misdiagnosed.
Yes.
And in my 30s, I actually got diagnosed with bipolar 2, and anxiety disorder. So it's been interesting when, as a practitioner, you study about it, and you're diagnosing others, but then you get on the other side where you're experiencing all of these symptoms, and you know about the medications, and now you're taking these medications, and you're experiencing side effects and a whole gamut of emotions.
Right.
So it's been an interesting journey, and as I say, it's like my wellness journey, and hopefully I get a more of an opportunity to talk about that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And Mark, what about you on
Yeah.
the neurodiverse side?
Yeah, so on the neurodiverse side, it's interesting. I want to point out both things about me. So I was born disabled. I was born premature. So I developed something called cerebral palsy, which is a
Oh, right.
neurological impact. I guess it falls within the same neurological thing, but it impacts me physically from my hips down. And that's why I created a dance company for disabled, non-disabled dancers. As I was growing up, I went to college and I was diagnosed with depression my freshman year of college. And then right after college, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I started medication right away, and I've been in therapy for over 10 years. But yes, I have bipolar depression, and on the physical side, I have cerebral palsy.
That's interesting. Yeah, people people often don't realize too, that a lot of times when there's a mental health issue, there also can be a physical aspect as well. And that some of the different neurodiversities feed off of each other. I was just speaking to a friend of mine who in Australia, and she has autism and ADHD. And then there's also been some mental health around anxiety and all of that because of masking and that whole bit. So I want to kind of start the conversation of recognizing that there's a reason to go be diagnosed, right? Kind of having that awareness. So for me, I came from a family with a lot on one side of a lot of mental health concern, but not everyone chose to do anything about it, right? And so very early on, my parents, at first I had a lot of just depression problems. It was very much focused on the depressive side. And so my parents realized this, said, we're going to do better for our daughter, and took me to go receive therapy. And God love them. They were even super picky about where I went and making sure I was comfortable and all of that. They did a really great job. And then later on, I started realizing that something still wasn't right, and that it was changing, and different things were happening with my brain. And so we went back and went through it again. And then, again later. So for me, it was just catching on that it was like, wait a minute, like I'm having this other experience too. And this is very different. My body would feel different. Because what started happening was the mania cycles started happening. And the best way I've heard it described by someone who's had both experiences is that it feels like you just snorted a big line of cocaine. Like it just gives, and I have not done that. Not that I judge, but I'm just saying I have not. So I don't personally know that, but that's how it's been described to me by somebody who's had both experiences. And so it was realizing that my body felt different. What about you, Mark? What kind of triggered you into going?
So, I have mental health problems on both sides, and addiction problems on both sides. And so, what's interesting was it was my freshman year of college. I'm a first generation college student. So I'm the first one in my family to graduate high school, go to college. And it was because I was low income and because I was a first gen student, I had to do a preparatory semester, a summer program before the regular semester started in the fall. So during that summer program, I met someone named Daisy who talked about mental health and wellness for the summer program. And so she said, reach out to us if you ever need anything. And I fast forward to about October, November in the fall semester. I couldn't get out of bed. Physically, I could not get out of bed. I was crying. So I emailed her and I said, I need help. And that started my journey. And then, after almost a year in therapy, I was diagnosed with depression. And I was very hesitant to take medication at that time.
Right.
Partly because I had seen and heard so many misconceptions around medication. There was so much stigma around it. That it would change my personality, that it would change who I was. And so I didn't want to numb out in that way. And so it wasn't until after college when I started my first full-time job at John Jay that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And the reason, looking back at it, I'm surprised I made it through college, because now with the diagnosis in mind, I look back at my college years, I'm like, that was mania. That I was going through these cycles and no one could really understand. I couldn't understand what was happening, So
Right.
it was very difficult to be high performing, what they call like a high functional depressive person, and then to have bipolar and to be undiagnosed and unmedicated. It led to a very interesting college experience. And so after college, when I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I immediately knew I was going on medication, because I have people in my family who are unmedicated, and I see how they are living with the condition. Right. And my biggest fear was becoming like them.
Right. And we're going to talk about that part in just a minute, because I shared that fear. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm glad you hit on that. So Rubaica, what about you? What prompted you to go get diagnosed?
So for me, Catherine, as I said, from a young age, experiencing anxiety, depression, kind of managing it. Then when I went to medical school, and you're learning about all of this, and, I was able to handle those stressors at that point. But, and then again, coming from a culture, I'm Indian. And so we don't talk about mental health. I'm glad that there's more of an awareness now and people are willing to talk about it. And as Mark said, I'm very high functioning. So I always tell people this, you never know what's going on behind that smile, right? We look like we've got it put together. And when I share my story with others, you're like, really? Is that what you're experiencing? Yes, I was coping. I was struggling. I was surviving. I really wanted to thrive. So I did get onto medications. And this is the thing with medications, right? With psychotropics, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks for you to kind of even see some sort of an effect. And for me, it's like, you start onto some sort of a treatment and you've got hope and you're anticipating feeling better. And then things aren't working out because you got to do a trial and error, right? And so there's frustration, and then there's a sense of discouragement when things aren't happening, and to be able to stay motivated through that process. I also attended therapy. So I did a lot of all of that. And I realized later on in life that I needed to do more, and I needed to have a healthier relationship with myself. When I started seeing myself differently, then I would think and I would act differently, and then I would be perceived differently. So that's a big part of my own wellness journey and where I am today.
I like that. And it is so important. And I just had a conversation yesterday evening about going through the diagnosis process and going through the figuring out treatment process. And a lot of it is that personal relationship, right? Yeah. A lot of it is that just, it's being realistic with yourself, getting to know yourself, learning your own patterns, learning your own needs. Because we think, oh, well, I'm me, I know what I need just automatically. No, a lot of it's actually having to learn about yourself. And so a lot of people are scared because you both kind of hit on the stigma, right? And there can be different reasons. It can be cultural. It can be a personal experience, negative experience with family, right? Mark, you and I both share that. We both had negative examples of what can go wrong, sometimes due to misdiagnosis, sometimes due to poor medication options. And only recently are there decent medications for this. For a long time, it was all very dangerous meds, including lithium, and which I'm not saying never take lithium. I want to throw that out there. There are appropriate times, but you also have to be very careful with lithium. And it also has some very serious side effects that can occur. So you have to, and it is scary going into something. So something I've started encouraging people to go through as they go through any diagnostic process is to reach out to others with the condition. Reach out to others, do your own research, get online and go on reliable sources and read blogs by people too, right? And I just want to throw this out there. LinkedIn has people who have all kinds of diversity, and they will post it. They'll put it in their headline. That's how I found you, Mark. That's, that's how you kind of find everybody. You can search on LinkedIn and really make those deep connections.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about the stigma in depth though a little bit, is because there's so much negativity. I've had people be afraid when I tell them I have bipolar disorder. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna like haul off and stab you. Like, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. And I think some of that's media. And I'm not personally offended by Hollywood portrayals only because they exaggerate literally everything. But I know it is also damaging. I'm also very conscious of that, that it is very damaging. And then there's other people that will tell you of some horror story of some person and they blame it on the disorder, which is not always accurate. So I want to talk about that a little bit and some things that we've each experienced. So Rubaica, I'm going to throw this one at you first. What are some things that you've seen, even, maybe just in your professional area that you've seen?
Yeah. So with stigma, I think, like, as you correctly pointed out, Catherine, a lot of it is born out of fear or out of just ignorance, and one of the things I like to talk about is mental health is health. And I think I talked about it previously as well. And I've seen this happening in so many different contexts, whether it's the workplace, whether it's family, right? And people will talk about, okay, I have a heart condition or I've got diabetes, and everybody is so empathetic. And the minute you say, I am experiencing anxiety, or I'm experiencing depression, or I just got diagnosed with this, pin drop silence, right? There's awkwardness. Why don't we want to have those conversations, right?
Right.
Mental health is health, and so I feel that what people, when you're talking about stigma, right? It's the way people are seeing you differently because of those negative attitudes, because of those stereotypes. And I think having conversations like this, Catherine, where we're talking about who we are, and we are just like everybody else. Actually, as you beautifully put it on your post, we have superpowers.
We do.
So changing the perception, I think, is so important. And when we think about psychiatry itself, right? So much has changed over so many decades, right? Things that were considered a psychiatric diagnosis maybe 30 years ago. I mean, think about psychiatric practices back in the 1800s, right? I mean, and where we are today. So it's just about I think education is a key component. And
I would agree.
And continuing to have conversations like this.
I agree. And with Mark, I want to give you a little bit different aspect of that to kind of throw your way. So one of the things that is scary is the idea that it's very negative, that this diagnosis is very negative. And I've also had that experience on the physical side as well. And in my experience, I think that doctors don't necessarily mean to be negative. To them, it's just more of a practicality issue. But I also know that the way that a doctor presents something can be very damaging and make a person feel like something is wrong and something is scary. So what is your take on understanding the disorder and being realistic about it versus being afraid, and the importance of distinguishing that during the diagnosis process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I was fortunate to have my diagnosis come from a woman of color, actually an Indian woman. And all my therapists have been people of color. And my current therapist is a Black queer woman. So I've been very fortunate. If you know anything about the mental health field, you know that we are underrepresented and under-researched in the field of mental health as people of color, as marginalized people. And so, I was very fortunate to get my diagnosis from a woman of color. I was very fortunate to have therapists of color to support me in that diagnosis and start my treatment plan. And so when she told me, it came from a space of empathy and a space of, this is what it is, this is what you're experiencing. How can I help you get better? How can I help you manage this, right? Because it doesn't go away. And so I think a lot of my irrational fears really was around becoming like my relative, right? And because they were so close, I mean, I'm talking about someone in my my immediate family, right? Someone that I had spent a lot of time with. And so I'm not naming who they are because of privacy reasons, but
Right.
there is this idea of like, you grow up in a home with someone who suffers from mental health issues or has mental health issues. I shouldn't say suffer. We don't necessarily suffer, right? I think
Right.
that's the important distinction there, right? There are people
Right.
who are suffering, who are
Yes.
homeless, who don't have access to healthcare, who don't have access to therapy, who don't have access to medication. That is not the three of us, as far as I know, right?
No.
And so it's a very different experience. And I want to make sure that the distinction, because when it comes to mental health, yes, there is stigma. Yes, there is, the fear of becoming like someone but there's been so much advancement in education and representation. And that's why I tell stories about my experiences with mental health, because when you can read it, when you can see it, then you start to see different portrayals and different reflections.
Right. And I think that it is so important too to distinguish. I like that you distinguish between the suffering versus not. So it's just like with a health condition. If diabetes goes untreated, you suffer. If cancer goes untreated, you suffer. Anything like that, it goes, you suffer. But once you manage it, then you're okay. And that's all it is management. That's all that it is. And I even made the reference last night on a podcast I was on about it. To me, it's no different than, finding out about your mental health and all that is no different than what a woman is coming into, her maturity, and she is going to have her cycle and all that. And your mom sitting you down or whoever and teaching you what that means and what's going to happen. And, you might have to prep and go get your Midol and your products and all that kind of stuff. But this is a natural thing. It's just part of who you are.
Right.
And some great things can come out of it, like babies and other things, and so it's no different than that. This is just part of how we were born, how, in most cases, how our brain processes information. And out of that can come the superpowers, right? Which even Harvard Business Review put out an article a couple months ago, and I just went nuts. I've talked about it 5,000 times since then, I swear, because they literally started talking about the superpowers of the neurodiverse, because what happens is, because our brain is different, we can do all kinds of things, like process information at hyper speed. Some people have hyper analytical ability and can just really get to the bottom of things. Incredible problem solving. So it's not always suffering. Sometimes, sometimes it's just coming to understand and be happy with. I actually enjoy my bipolar 1 now, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time now, because I've learned to manage it and to be happy with it. So, but it is scary at first, right? Like I feel like you have to have those feelings when you first go through diagnosis.
When I got that, when I got my diagnosis, I literally couldn't stop crying. I had to call one of my mentors, who's like very close to me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be like my relative. All these irrational thoughts were coming to my mind, right? And she said to me, I'm not quoting her verbatim, but she said, you will survive this. You will get through this. You will get the help you need. You are not going to be like your relative because you have so much more access. You have so much more education. You have so much more experience. And that was it allowed the irrational fears to kind of subside, because I realized my greatest fear was becoming like my relative, but I wasn't acknowledging my own privilege. Right. I wasn't acknowledging the fact that I'm educated, that I have access to healthcare, that I have access to quality mental health services, that I was going to have access to medication. And I remember when I was talking about this at work, because we talked about, I don't know if we're going to go into this conversation or not, but when I told my boss about my mental health stuff, she was very empathetic. She met me with compassion and grace. And she said, because there was one point in my first year at John Jay that I kept calling out of work because I was so depressed I couldn't get out of bed. Yeah. And she said, do we need to talk to HR? Do we need to talk about accommodations? And she made sure I was able to go to therapy in New Jersey and then travel to New York City after therapy to go to work. She did everything she could to support my mental health services, right? And
I just want to pause on that. Managers and professionals, that's how you handle that.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. That was the correct response. Yeah. We see so much of the opposite of that, right? Yeah. So, Rubaica, when you're from the clinician side, because you've been on the other side of the desk too, right? Yes. So when you're going through this process and somebody is having their emotions about their diagnosis, what are some of the things that you do to encourage them and to let them know, hey, it's not all bad. It's okay. Whether it's a neurodiversity or whether it's just, various and sundry mental health diagnoses, what's kind of your process there?
Absolutely. And I think Mark hit the nail on the head when you were describing your own process, with your
Mhm.
practitioner. And I think giving that space to process what you're feeling. For some people, yes, people might think that, getting that diagnosis is okay, it's all done. No, it's suddenly now you've gotten this diagnosis. What are you going to do with it? And actually, people go through, we talk about the stages of grief, right? People
Mm.
actually go through that with a diagnosis, where you
Mhm.
have first maybe that denial and not wanting to accept it. I know I've done it myself, where you want to ignore the symptoms, or you want to downplay, or you want to hide it from people. And then you go on to the anger part, where there's some emotion now coming up, the bargaining or the negotiation, which is, what if I had done this, or what if I had sought treatment earlier, maybe I wouldn't be feeling this way, and then depression, when you're kind of feeling, okay, so now this is it, what do I do? But the most beautiful step is that last step of acceptance, right? So
Mhm.
I think as a clinician, when I'm, and again, as you said, Mark, how you give that diagnosis, right, with empathy. And this is really another thing I'm very passionate about, is emotional intelligence. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we need to train our clinicians to be more emotionally intelligent, because
Yes.
it's one thing to put a diagnosis together, but how you deliver that diagnosis is so key. And being supportive, of your client, of your patient, letting them know that you're there with them and going to help them process whatever they're going through. I think that has always been my approach.
Right. I like that. That's fantastic. And the
Right.
emotional intelligence is so very important. That's a skill that so many people unfortunately lack, but we
Yes.
need to start working on that. So
Yeah.
I want to know, so, I make, whenever I talk about these things, I like to make it very clear. I don't advocate for or against medication. I
Mhm.
don't advocate for or against psychotherapy, for or against anything else. I believe that everybody has their own way to deal with their condition and in a healthy way. But I also do like to encourage that you do need to do something, just like with the physical condition, right? You do need to choose something. You have to choose something to heal you and something smart, and be careful with that, because there are some people out there that are, oh, if you take this supplement, you'll no longer have whatever it is.
Right.
I got enraged one time and reported a company to the Federal Trade Commission and the Attorney General, because they were putting out that this supplement they had would cure autism.
Mm.
And I was like, no. And first of all, do they even need to be cured? I don't think so. But let's say that they do. Your supplement absolutely does not do that.
Right.
so
Right. Right.
stop. So stop lying to people. So be very careful of of the things that you engage in, but treatment is important, some kind of treatment. And I like, Mark, that you talked about the educational aspect, because that's huge too. Being educated, having access to the internet like we do, we can learn so much for ourselves and
Right.
be educated. And it's so important to learn so much for ourselves. So thinking about getting people, so okay, now they've got the diagnosis, hopefully the doctor was empathetic. you know
Yeah.
Hopefully. What's the next step? How do you start to siphon through all of this? Mark, kind of what are some of
Yeah.
your thoughts there?
Well, it definitely was a grieving process. So I love that you shared that way, Rebecca. Like the idea of going through the cycle, because I had to do that for myself. I had to
Mhm.
kind of grieve. One, I had to acknowledge that I was feeling these feelings. Right, self awareness is really important. Then I had to really navigate understanding that I was never going to be like my relatives.
Mhm.
Right, and I had to like acknowledge that right off the bat, because I was already doing things to change that narrative. Right,
Right.
I was getting educated, I was getting health services, I was taking medication. So once that irrational thought faded away, it became about managing. And it
Mhm.
sucks that every day I have to take a pill, right? It sucks that I have to, and I think not enough people talk about the everyday existing of with a
Mhm.
disorder, right? And I think
Right.
that there are some days, like yesterday, I was lovely. It was Valentine's Day. I'm single. I spent it with my girlfriends. We're all single. We all had a great time. This morning, I woke up really sad for no apparent reason. I just woke up feeling really overwhelmed with sadness, and I knew I had to do this talk today. And I really believe in showing up authentically, right, and really honoring the space where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
But that's part of the course when you have, depression and bipolar disorder. There are some days when your mood shifts and you don't know why. There are days when you have low energy. And, I think what I really want to encourage people, whether you take medication or not, I'm a big proponent for therapy.
Yes.
And the reason why I say that is because so much of my existence around mental health has been through therapy for over 10 years. And, I'm such a proponent for that because there's so much stigma just to even talk about these things, especially in people of color communities, especially among queer folks and things like that. So it's really important that we acknowledge that silence has not protected us, to quote Audre Lorde. Your silence will not protect you. And so when it comes to mental health, your silence will not protect you. And I want to mention, Kelsey, the Miss America winner who committed suicide. I'm sorry, she died by suicide. I don't want to say committed. She died by suicide. And she was 30, and I'm 30. And there was all these things around, like, her story has really impacted me in a way that I thought, like, the smile, the beauty, the career aspirations, the career success, all of those things did not stop that from happening.
No,
Right.
it doesn't. And people
And
don't
so,
understand that. I have a cousin who starved and drank herself to death out of depression. And because she chose not to get help. People offered, they tried.
yeah.
She chose not to. And that's the scary part. And that's why it's important to not let it spiral. And trust me when I tell you, over half the population has some sort of mental health concern at any given time, whether it's temporary or long term. You're not alone.
Right.
Literally half the people you know are going to have something. So don't feel ashamed. Don't feel embarrassed. And you'd be really surprised once you start talking about it, how many people come to you and go, right here, right there with you.
Right.
And on the happier side is once you go through that research and once you go through that process, is that then you start to realize all the amazing things about you that come from whatever that is. So I talk about the superpowers a lot, and so for me, I can work at lightning speeds. And actually some of this does chemically come from my bipolar disorder is these super confidence, just that super confidence. I can do anything, not afraid, that type of thing. And that for me, that's what came through it. So, Rubaica, what are your superpowers? What is a blessing that you have because of your neurodiversity and mental health?
For sure. As I said, and I love what Mark said with the self-awareness piece, because that was the first, for my healing journey, it was the self-awareness, and it was really embracing who I am instead of resisting that. And in doing so, I was able to uncover all of my strengths and my superpowers. So a big one, I would say there are four that I've uncovered about myself. And I probably for yourself, Catherine and Mark, you guys might identify with this as well. A lot of courage. Because of everything that we've gone through, there's so much of courage. Like anytime there's a challenging situation, we are willing to, as I said, battle on, right? Because of that courage. I feel as a neurodiverse person, right? There's so much of compassion for myself, for others, right? And it's all about social justice. I see that with you, Catherine. I see that with you, Mark, as well, right? We want to do better for others.
Right.
Also, creativity.
Oh,
Yeah, creativity is through the roof.
Mark, that one might apply to you too, just maybe.
Yeah. For sure.
And curiosity, because we see things in different ways. So there's always a curiosity. So I feel like, those are my superpowers, and I use that. Like I maximize my potential thanks to those superpowers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Mark, what about you? What are your superpowers?
Yeah, I have a few. I think empathy is one. I'm able to really connect and relate with folks because of my own experiences, right? And because of what I've been through. And so I'm able to meet people where they are. And then creativity is definitely one of them. And there are times I get super creative and I'm always doing projects. So my therapist always reminding me, like, you're doing too much, scale back, right? They always have all these ideas. I want to go. Another superpower I think of mine is authenticity. I often say, and that may not be necessarily related to the mental health condition, but it's because of my mental health condition and because of the stories I tell and create that has allowed me to connect with others, right?
Right.
And so authenticity for me is a daily choice. I wake up every day to show up right? I may put makeup
Mhm.
on so I can feel better about my face, but I still show up, right? And so I think that's important to mention because I think, there's so much misconceptions around, especially bipolar, right? I think people have
Mhm.
gotten a little bit more better understanding of depression, but I don't think people have understand enough about bipolar disorder.
Right.
And so I think there is a just misconception that we're dangerous, that we are,
Mhm.
and for some people that may be true. There's misconceptions around being moody and that our mood swings are always super severe, which can be true. But there is also, the pendulum swings both ways, and so I think
Mhm.
that it's important to recognize that it's the passion, the creativity, the storytelling, all these things, the energy, the lack of energy. I mean, like it's all because of my condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I love, so there's always the yin and the yang, right? Like, not to be super hippie about this, but there's always the good and the bad with everything, right?
Right.
And so there are days that suck. I posted the other day when I was having my seizure disorder, and I put a video up to show people this is a bad day for me. This is what this looks like. And I'm shaking and I'm twitching and I can't stop. And it's just going to go on for hours. And it's very
Right.
frustrating. And but then there are days that are really great, specifically because of what makes me different. And I wouldn't trade it because it's helped me to grow professionally. It's helped me to grow personally.
Right.
And it's also inspired me to get out there and to do more to normalize this, because a third of the just shy of a third, about 29% of the population is neurodiverse in some way. That's a huge part. So we need to stop pretending that it doesn't exist and embrace it and love it and nourish it and cultivate these people and stand around and go, let's put them on a pedestal and see, or let's put them in a space and see what awesome things they can do, because
Yeah.
this community has so many talents and so much to offer. And at least my personal opinion is, I don't want to be different than this. I like it.
Mm.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's ADHD and loves it. And yeah, there's bad days, but I don't want to be different. I like how my mind works and it makes me
Right.
happy. And I think it makes me successful. It's the reason, it's a big
Yeah.
piece of the reason that I'm successful. So I want to close out today by thanking both of you, first of all, for coming and sharing so much about your own journeys and talking about a very important topic.
Yes.
um, and I want to give people an opportunity to connect with you and learn a little bit more about you. So we're going to start with you, Rubaica. Tell us what awesome things you have coming up, how people can connect with you, anything else like that you want to say.
So actually, I have a podcast happening later today, so that's going to be about my wellness journey as well. I'm highly active on LinkedIn, and I love connecting with mental health advocates because we're all about raising awareness and having these pivotal conversations. So I would really encourage you, if you're passionate about mental health, you want to make a difference, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I would be glad to connect.
I love that. And what about you, Mark?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me again. I feel, I always feel really honored when people make space and invite me to the table virtually or in person. I don't take that for granted. You had options. So thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
And, I think you can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Travis Rivera, Mark Travis Rivera on LinkedIn. My handle on social media, Twitter and Instagram is Mark, Mark, Trav, Trav, Rivera, Rivera. You can also go to my website, www.marktravisrivera.com.
Right. I love that. So many ways to connect too. I love that you guys have like all these different ways. I'm the same exact way. So I professionally, I do work in recruiting and consulting. So if neurodiverse folks, if you are curious about talking to your employers about your neurodiversity, if you want to talk about finding a job as a neurodiverse person, I am very happy to discuss that with you. Or if you just want to talk to somebody else who's been through diagnosis and you just need to talk to somebody, I'm here for you as well. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm one of two Catherine McCords, I think, on the whole LinkedIn platform. It's spelled this way. Um, so I'm pretty easy to find. You can also go to one of my sites, supermaniashow.com. You can go to careerlaunchlive.com. That's my kind of professional topic show, and connect with me there. And thank you both so very much. We ran way over time, but I'm super excited about it. So thank you both so very much for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Come again next week. We have some more wonderful topics to discuss about the superpowers of the neurodiverse. Be great, everybody.
Thank you.